The desert heat shimmered off the asphalt as Staff Sergeant Maya Rodriguez adjusted her civilian clothes one more time. The lightweight cotton shirt and faded jeans were a far cry from her usual Air Force fatigues, but blending in was crucial for this mission. She had been traveling for 3 days across the remote regions of eastern Afghanistan, gathering intelligence on insurgent supply routes that had been troubling coalition forces for months. Maya wasn't your typical intelligence gatherer. As an Air Force combat controller, she was trained in everything from close air support to battlefield communications, demolitions to advanced combat tactics. Her small frame and unassuming appearance often fooled people into underestimating her capabilities, which had served her well throughout her military career. At 28 years old, she had already completed 2 deployments and earned the respect of both her peers and superiors for her quick thinking and unshakable calm under pressure. The checkpoint ahead appeared routine enough. A simple concrete structure flanked by sandbags and razor wire, manned by what appeared to be local security forces. Maya had crossed dozens of similar checkpoints during her journey, each one requiring careful navigation of local politics and varying levels of corruption. Her cover story was solid. She was a freelance journalist documenting reconstruction efforts in rural areas. Her press credentials were authentic, though her true mission remained classified. As she approached in her dust-covered pickup truck, Maya noticed something that immediately put her on alert. The 5 men manning the checkpoint weren't wearing standard uniforms. Their clothing was mismatched, their weapons appeared to be personal rather than issued, and their positioning around the checkpoint was sloppy by military standards. More concerning was their body language. They carried themselves with the swagger of men who believed they owned this particular stretch of road. The lead man stepped forward as Maya's truck came to a stop. He was tall and lean with sun-weathered skin and eyes that held too much confidence for a simple checkpoint guard. His companions spread out slightly, creating what Maya recognized as a classic intimidation formation. These weren't security forces at all. Maya rolled down her window and offered a friendly smile, speaking in accented English mixed with basic Pashto. "Good morning, officers. I have my travel documents ready if you need to see them." The tall man's grin revealed several gold teeth. "Documents, yes. But first, maybe you tell us what brings such a pretty lady to our remote area alone." His English was better than she had expected, which meant he was likely more educated and potentially more dangerous than the typical rural criminal. "I'm a journalist," Maya replied, maintaining her cover while internally cataloging every detail about the 5 men. The leader appeared to be in his 30s, confident and clearly in charge. The second man was shorter but heavily built, with scarred knuckles that suggested he preferred physical solutions to problems. The third was young, maybe early 20s, nervous energy radiating from his constant fidgeting. The fourth appeared to be the oldest of the group, with gray streaking his beard and the patient stillness of someone who had seen considerable violence. The 5th man hung back near the checkpoint structure, positioned where he could cover their escape route if needed. "Journalist," the leader repeated, tasting the word. "We don't see many journalists in this area. Especially not American journalists traveling alone." He gestured for her to step out of the vehicle. Maya complied, moving slowly and keeping her hands visible. Her press credentials and false identification were in her shirt pocket, but she also carried items that would be much harder to explain if these men decided to search her thoroughly. An encrypted satellite communication device was hidden in her backpack, along with detailed topographical maps marked with potential insurgent routes and a compact 9mm pistol secured in a custom holster at the small of her back. "Your papers," the leader demanded, extending his hand while his companions moved closer to the truck. Maya could hear them speaking in rapid Pashto, discussing something about the vehicle's contents and whether she might be carrying anything valuable. As she handed over her credentials, Maya's trained eyes continued gathering intelligence. The checkpoint's official logbook looked unused, covered in dust and clearly decorative rather than functional. The radio equipment that should have connected this outpost to higher authorities appeared to be either broken or deliberately disabled. Most telling of all, she noticed fresh tire tracks leading away from the checkpoint into the desert, tracks that suggested heavy vehicles had recently used this position for purposes other than routine security checks. The leader examined her press credentials with exaggerated care, occasionally looking up at her with an expression that made her skin crawl. Maya Rodriguez, freelance journalist from United States, he read aloud. Here to write stories about our beautiful country. That's right, Maya confirmed. I'm particularly interested in reconstruction projects and how they're helping local communities. Reconstruction, the heavily built man laughed harshly. The only thing being reconstructed here is our bank accounts when travelers like you pay the appropriate road fees. Maya felt her jaw tighten slightly but maintained her innocent expression. Road fees? I wasn't informed about any tolls on this route. Many things you were not informed about, the leader said, pocketing her credentials. This is dangerous area. Many bad people. Lucky for you, we provide protection services. Very reasonable rates. The young nervous man had been circling her truck and, suddenly, called out excitedly in Pashto. He had found her backpack and was gesturing animatedly at its contents. Maya's pulse quickened as she watched him pull out her camera equipment, which thankfully was exactly what a journalist would carry. But, if he dug deeper and found the satellite communicator or the detailed maps, her cover would be blown instantly. You have expensive equipment, the leader observed. Must be successful journalist to afford such nice things. The magazine I work for provides the equipment, Maya replied. I'm just documenting stories about people rebuilding their lives after conflict. The oldest man, who had been silent up to this point, stepped forward and spoke quietly to the leader in Pashto. Maya caught enough of the conversation to understand they were debating whether she was worth more as a ransom target or if they should simply rob her and send her on her way. The mention of Americans paying large sums for hostages made her blood run cold. My friend here thinks you might be worth more than simple road fees, the leader said with a wider grin. American journalists, especially attractive ones, sometimes have families willing to pay significant money for their safe return. Maya forced herself to laugh. I'm just a freelancer barely making ends meet. My family back home would have trouble raising money for a bus ticket, let alone any kind of ransom. We'll see, the leader replied ominously. First, we need to search your vehicle properly. Make sure you're not carrying anything illegal. This was the moment Maya had been dreading. A thorough search would reveal not only her true identity but also the classified intelligence material she had gathered over the past 3 days. Worse, if they discovered she was military personnel operating in civilian clothes, they might decide she was a spy and treat her accordingly. The young man continued rifling through her backpack while his companions began searching the truck's interior. Maya watched helplessly as they pulled out her sleeping bag, water purification tablets, energy bars, and other travel supplies. Each item was examined and either tossed aside or pocketed by one of the thugs. You travel very prepared, the heavily built man commented as he found her first aid kit. Like soldier, not journalist. Anyone traveling alone in remote areas needs to be prepared, Maya replied quickly. Basic survival gear is essential. The leader stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his stale tobacco breath. Strip off your shirt. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her expression calm. Excuse me? You heard. Remove shirt. We need to check for weapons, wires, tracking devices. Standard security procedure. Maya knew this wasn't standard anything, it was intimidation designed to humiliate and control her. But, more critically, removing her shirt would reveal the pistol holstered against her back. She needed to buy time and create some kind of distraction. I understand your security concerns, she said, raising her hands slowly. But, as a journalist, I need to document this interaction for my story about checkpoint procedures. Would you mind if I took some photos first? My readers would be fascinated by authentic security measures. The leader hesitated, clearly torn between his desire to maintain control and his vanity about appearing in an American publication. His companions continued their search of the truck, but Maya could tell they hadn't found the satellite communicator yet. It was hidden in a specially modified compartment in her backpack that required knowing exactly where to press to open. Photos could be good, the leader finally agreed. Show American readers that we provide serious security services here. Maya reached slowly for her camera, using the movement to subtly assess her tactical situation. 5 armed men, spread out around the checkpoint with varying levels of alertness. The leader was closest to her, focused on preening for potential photographs. The heavily built man was searching the truck's cab and, temporarily, had his back turned. The nervous young man was still occupied with her backpack contents. The older man stood near the checkpoint's entrance, positioned as a lookout. The 5th man remained by the rear of the structure, but she could see he was more interested in smoking a cigarette than maintaining security. As Maya raised her camera, she began calculating angles, distances, and potential weapons. Her Air Force combat training had drilled endless scenarios into her muscle memory: how to disarm an opponent, how to use cover effectively, how to turn everyday objects into weapons when necessary. The checkpoint's concrete walls could provide protection from gunfire. The scattered tools and equipment around the structure could be improvised weapons. Most importantly, she had the element of surprise, since none of these men suspected they were dealing with a highly trained combat specialist. But 5 against 1 remained terrible odds, even with surprise on her side. Maya knew she would need to be smart about when and how to make her move. For now, she continued playing the role of compliant journalist while looking for the right opportunity to turn the tables on her captors. "Stand together," she instructed through her camera lens. "Make sure your weapons are visible." American readers love seeing authentic security forces. The men began positioning themselves for the photographs, and Maya started calculating exactly how she was going to survive the next few minutes. The camera clicked as Maya took several shots of the 5 men posing with their weapons. Each photo served a dual purpose, maintaining her cover while giving her precious time to study their positions and equipment more carefully. Through the lens, she could see that their weapons were a mix of AK-47 variants and older rifles, well maintained but not military standard. The ammunition pouches on their belts appeared full, and each man carried at least one sidearm. "Very good," Maya said, lowering the camera. "These shots will really help American readers understand the security situation here." The leader's chest puffed with pride, but the older man stepped forward and spoke sharply in Pashto. Maya caught the gist of his concern. They were wasting time with photos when they should be focusing on determining whether their captive was worth keeping or disposing of quickly. "Enough pictures," the leader decided. "Now we search properly." The young man suddenly shouted from behind her truck. He had found something that excited him greatly, and Maya's stomach dropped as she saw him holding up her satellite communication device. In his hands, the compact military-grade equipment looked exactly like what it was: sophisticated technology that no freelance journalist would possess. "What is this?" the leader demanded, snatching the device and examining its military markings. Maya's mind raced. The satellite communicator was encrypted and would be useless to them without proper authorization codes, but its discovery completely destroyed her cover story. She could see suspicion hardening in the leader's eyes as he turned the device over in his hands. "I honestly don't know," she lied smoothly. "I found it in the truck when I bought it in Kabul. The previous owner left some equipment behind. I thought it might be some kind of radio." "You think we are stupid?" the heavily built man snarled, moving closer with his hand resting on his pistol grip. "This is military equipment. No civilian has such things." The leader held up the communicator, and Maya could see him mentally calculating what possession of such equipment might mean. A journalist with military-grade communications gear could be a spy, could be worth significant money to the right buyers, or could be dangerous enough to eliminate immediately. "Strip," the leader commanded again, this time with no pretense of politeness. "Now." Maya knew she had run out of options. In seconds, they would discover her concealed pistol and any remaining doubt about her true nature would vanish. She needed to act while she still had some element of surprise, even though the odds remained overwhelmingly against her. "Okay," she said, reaching for the bottom of her shirt. "But I want to document this for my story. The treatment of journalists at checkpoints is important news." As she began to lift her shirt, Maya shifted her weight to the balls of her feet and let her combat training take over. The motion of removing her shirt provided perfect cover for what came next. Instead of pulling the shirt over her head, Maya spun it rapidly and snapped it like a whip directly into the leader's eyes. The unexpected attack caught him completely off guard, and he stumbled backward, cursing in both Pashto and Arabic. Before he could recover, Maya had already moved. Her hand found the concealed pistol at the small of her back as she dove toward the concrete barrier that formed part of the checkpoint structure. The 9mm came up smooth and fast, years of training making the draw automatic even under extreme stress. The heavily built man was reaching for his own weapon when Maya's first shot took him center mass. The sound of gunfire in the confined space was deafening, but she was already moving to her next target. The nervous young man froze for a crucial half-second, giving Maya the time she needed to put 2 rounds into his chest before he could bring his rifle to bear. The older man proved to be the most dangerous opponent. Even as his 2 companions were falling, he was already in motion, using the checkpoint's concrete wall for cover while bringing his AK-47 into firing position. His first burst went wide as Maya rolled behind a stack of sandbags, but she could hear the rounds splintering concrete inches from her head. The leader had recovered from the shirt attack and was screaming orders to his remaining men while fumbling for his own weapon. The 5th man, who had been positioned at the rear of the checkpoint, was running toward the sound of gunfire but was temporarily blocked by the structure itself. Maya's Air Force training kicked into high gear. She had been in firefights before, but never at such close quarters and never so badly outnumbered. Her breathing steadied automatically as she assessed the tactical situation. 2 targets down permanently, 3 still active. Limited cover, limited ammunition, and no backup coming. The older man fired another burst, this one more carefully aimed. Maya felt concrete chips shower down on her as the rounds impacted just above her position. She needed to move before he could get a proper angle on her hiding spot. Rolling to her left, Maya came up firing. Her first shot forced the older man to duck back behind cover, giving her the seconds she needed to sprint to a better position behind the checkpoint's main structure. As she moved, she caught a glimpse of the 5th man rounding the corner of the building with his rifle raised. Training had taught her to prioritize targets based on immediate threat level. The 5th man had a clear shot at her new position, making him the most dangerous opponent at that moment. Maya's pistol tracked toward him automatically, muscle memory guiding her movements. Her shots took him high in the chest, spinning him around and sending his rifle clattering across the concrete. But even as he fell, Maya could hear the older man moving to flank her position. She was caught between his advance and the leader, who had finally gotten his own weapon ready. The leader opened fire with an old Soviet pistol, his shots wild and poorly aimed but numerous enough to keep Maya pinned behind cover. She could hear him shouting instructions to the older man, trying to coordinate their attack to overwhelm her position. Maya realized she was in a classic military crossfire situation. Both remaining opponents were moving to positions where they could catch her in overlapping fields of fire. Once they achieved proper positioning, her cover would become useless and the engagement would end quickly. She needed to break up their coordination and eliminate one of them before they could execute their flanking maneuver. The question was which one to target first and how to get a clear shot without exposing herself to fire from the other. The older man was clearly the more skilled opponent, but he was also being more careful about his positioning. The leader was closer but also more erratic in his movements and shooting. Maya decided to take advantage of the leader's overconfidence. Pulling a fragmentation grenade from her belt, part of her emergency equipment that the thugs hadn't discovered yet, Maya calculated the angles carefully. The checkpoint's concrete walls would contain and direct the blast effectively, but she needed to time the throw perfectly to catch the leader while avoiding the older man's position. "American bitch," the leader screamed, apparently running low on ammunition as his firing became more sporadic. "You think you can fight all of us?" Maya pulled the pin and let the spoon fly, counting off the seconds in her head. The grenade sailed in a perfect arc over the sandbags and landed within feet of where the leader was taking cover. The explosion was tremendous in the confined space, and Maya felt the concussion wave even from her protected position. When the dust and debris settled, the leader was no longer a factor in the engagement. That left the older man, who had proven himself to be the most dangerous opponent from the beginning. Maya could hear him moving carefully through the wreckage, trying to get an angle on her position while avoiding exposure himself. This was clearly someone with significant combat experience. "You fight well," he called out in accented English. But, you are alone and far from help. Surrender now and I will make death quick. Maya didn't bother responding. Words were pointless at this stage, and her position was compromised anyway. The grenade blast had destroyed much of her cover, leaving her exposed to attack from multiple angles. She needed to end this engagement quickly before the sound of gunfire and explosions attracted unwanted attention from other hostile forces in the area. Her satellite communicator was somewhere in the wreckage, probably damaged beyond use. Her truck might still be operational, but reaching it would require crossing open ground under fire. The older man had gone quiet, which Maya recognized as a bad sign. Experienced fighters didn't waste time with dramatic speeches, they positioned themselves carefully and waited for the right moment to strike. She could feel him maneuvering somewhere in the checkpoint's ruins, but couldn't pinpoint his exact location. Maya's ammunition was running low. She had fired multiple shots during the initial engagement and couldn't afford to waste rounds on suppressive fire. Each shot needed to count if she was going to survive this encounter. The silence stretched on, broken only by the settling sounds of debris from the grenade blast. Maya controlled her breathing and listened carefully for any sound that might betray her opponent's position. Her Air Force training had included extensive instruction in individual combat techniques, but this situation was testing every skill she had ever learned. A small stone bounced off the concrete near her position. Maya recognized it immediately as a deliberate distraction. The older man was trying to draw her attention while he moved to a better firing position. The technique was professional and suggested military training rather than simple criminal experience. Maya remained motionless, letting her peripheral vision scan for movement while keeping her weapon trained on the most likely approach routes. Patience was crucial now. The first person to reveal their position would likely lose this deadly game of hide and seek. The attack came from an unexpected direction. Instead of trying to flank her position, the older man had climbed onto the checkpoint's roof structure and was firing down at her from above. Maya rolled desperately as rounds impacted where she had been lying just seconds before. Her return fire forced him to seek cover on the roof, but Maya realized she was now in an even worse tactical position. High ground advantage was significant in any firefight, and her opponent had achieved it while maintaining good cover for himself. Maya's military training had covered urban combat scenarios extensively, including situations where enemies held elevated positions. The standard response was to either eliminate the high ground advantage through overwhelming firepower or to neutralize the elevated threat through indirect means. Since she lacked the firepower for the first option, Maya would have to get creative with the second approach. The checkpoint structure was old and probably not built to military engineering standards. If she could undermine its structural integrity, she might be able to bring down her opponent's elevated position. Maya studied the checkpoint structure with the analytical eye of a combat engineer. The building was typical of hastily constructed military outposts, concrete blocks mortared together with minimal attention to structural integrity. The roof appeared to be corrugated metal sheets supported by steel beams that were probably anchored into the concrete walls rather than properly integrated into the foundation. Her remaining grenades could potentially bring down sections of the structure, but she needed to be precise about placement to avoid bringing the entire building down on top of herself. The older man had chosen his elevated position well. He could cover most of her potential movement while remaining protected from direct fire. Another burst of automatic fire from above sent concrete chips flying around Maya's position. The older man was being patient, taking careful shots rather than wasting ammunition on spray and pray tactics. Each burst was precisely aimed at locations where he thought she might be trying to move. Maya pulled her second fragmentation grenade and studied the building's support structure more carefully. If she could take out one of the main support beams, the roof section where her opponent was positioned might become unstable enough to force him down or at least compromise his firing position. The challenge was getting close enough to place the grenade accurately without exposing herself to fire from above. The older man had positioned himself where he could observe all the obvious approach routes to the building. Maya noticed a drainage ditch that ran along the side of the checkpoint structure. It was shallow and offered minimal concealment, but it might provide just enough cover to get within grenade range of the building's foundation. The question was whether she could move quickly enough to avoid being caught in the open. She pulled the pin on her second grenade and began low-crawling toward the drainage ditch. The older man spotted her movement immediately and sent a stream of rounds toward her position, but the angle from the roof made it difficult for him to get clean shots at a target moving so low to the ground. Maya rolled into the ditch as bullets sparked off the concrete around her. The shallow depression provided barely enough cover to protect her from direct fire, but she was now close enough to the building's foundation to make an accurate throw. The support beam she had targeted was visible through a gap in the concrete blocks. It was steel, probably 6 inches in diameter, and clearly bearing significant structural load from the roof above. A properly placed explosive could shear it completely or at least weaken it enough to cause partial collapse. Maya cooked the grenade for 2 seconds before throwing it, timing the explosion to occur just as it reached the target area. The blast was smaller than her first grenade but more focused, and she felt the building shake as the explosion damaged the support structure. The older man's firing suddenly became erratic as his platform began shifting beneath him. Maya heard him shouting in Pashto, probably cursing her tactics or calling for help that wasn't coming. The roof structure was holding, but barely. She could see visible sagging in the metal sheets where the damaged support beam was no longer carrying its full load. Taking advantage of his momentarily compromised position, Maya sprinted from the drainage ditch toward better cover closer to the building. The older man tried to track her with his rifle, but the unstable roof made accurate shooting nearly impossible. Maya reached the relative safety of the building's wall just as another section of the roof structure gave way with a groaning crash of twisted metal. She couldn't see whether her opponent had been caught in the collapse, but the firing from above had stopped completely. Moving carefully around the building's perimeter, Maya kept her pistol ready for any sign that the older man had survived the partial collapse and was repositioning for another attack. The silence was concerning. Experienced fighters didn't give up easily, and she couldn't assume he was out of the fight until she confirmed it visually. The checkpoint's main entrance had been partially blocked by debris from the roof collapse, but Maya could see through the gaps into the interior. What she saw made her blood run cold. The older man had not only survived the collapse but had used the confusion to reposition himself inside the building where he had access to additional weapons and equipment. Maya could see him methodically checking an assortment of rifles and ammunition that the thugs had apparently stockpiled inside the checkpoint. Worse, he was speaking into a radio, calling for reinforcements from whatever organization or criminal network these men represented. Maya caught enough of his Pashto to understand that he was reporting an attack by American Special Forces and requesting immediate backup. The tactical situation had just become exponentially more dangerous. Maya's training told her that staying to fight additional opponents was tactically unsound when she had the option to withdraw. But her truck was still outside the checkpoint, and she needed to recover her equipment and intelligence materials if possible. The older man finished his radio communication and began moving toward the building's rear exit. Maya realized he was probably planning to circle around and catch her in the open when she tried to reach her vehicle. It was exactly what she would do in his position. Maya checked her remaining ammunition, 4 rounds left in the pistol plus 1 spare magazine. Not much firepower for what could become an extended engagement, especially if enemy reinforcements were already en route to the checkpoint. She needed to neutralize the older man quickly and get out of the area before additional hostiles arrived. The problem was that he now held the tactical advantage, interior position with multiple weapons and ammunition, knowledge of the local area, and backup coming. Maya's Air Force training had covered exactly this type of scenario during her combat controller certification. When outnumbered and outgunned, the key was to use superior mobility and unexpected tactics to offset the enemy's advantages. Conventional approaches would favor the defender, so she needed to do something unconventional. The checkpoint had been built near a small fuel depot, probably to service military vehicles that used this route regularly. Maya could see several fuel barrels stacked outside the main structure, along with what appeared to be a diesel generator for powering the facility's electrical systems. A plan began forming in Maya's mind. It was dangerous and would require precise timing, but it offered her best chance of eliminating the remaining threat and escaping before reinforcements arrived. Moving carefully to avoid detection, Maya worked her way toward the fuel depot. The older man was still inside the checkpoint building, probably watching for her to make a move toward her truck. He wouldn't expect her to approach the fuel storage area. Maya found what she was looking for, a jerry can of diesel fuel and some plastic tubing that was probably used for siphoning fuel from the storage barrels. Improvised incendiary devices were part of her demolitions training, and diesel fuel could be very effective when used properly. The challenge was getting close enough to the checkpoint building to deploy the improvised weapon without being detected. The older man was clearly experienced and would be watching for any sign of her movement around the perimeter. Maya noticed that the checkpoint's electrical generator was still running, providing power to the building's lights and radio equipment. The generator was positioned outside the building but close enough that fuel lines ran directly into the structure to power interior systems. If she could introduce diesel fuel into the building's electrical system, the resulting fire would force the older man out into the open where she could engage him with her remaining ammunition. The technique was dangerous and would probably destroy any useful intelligence materials inside the checkpoint, but survival took priority over intelligence gathering. Maya began carefully disconnecting the fuel line that fed the building's generator. Diesel fuel was less volatile than gasoline, but it would burn hot and fast once ignited. She needed to create a fuel trail that would carry fire into the building while giving her enough time to get to a safe distance before ignition. The work was painstakingly slow. Any sudden movement or noise could alert the older man to her position and bring the engagement to a quick and fatal conclusion. Maya's hands remained steady as she manipulated the fuel connections, but she could feel time pressure mounting as enemy reinforcements drew closer. Finally, Maya had created a trail of diesel fuel that led from outside the building directly into the generator room where electrical equipment would provide ignition sources. She pulled out her emergency flare, standard equipment for combat controllers who might need to signal aircraft in emergency situations. The flare would burn hot enough to ignite the diesel fuel and start a fire that would spread rapidly through the building's interior. Once the blaze took hold, the older man would have to evacuate his defensive position or risk being burned alive. Maya lit the flare and tossed it into the fuel trail, then sprinted toward a position where she could cover the building's exits with her pistol. The ignition was almost instantaneous as diesel fuel caught fire with a whooshing sound and began spreading toward the building's interior. Within seconds, Maya could see flames beginning to appear inside the checkpoint structure. The older man's shouts of alarm told her the fire was spreading faster than he had anticipated. Smoke began pouring out of the building's windows and doorways. The older man appeared at the building's main entrance, coughing from smoke inhalation but still carrying his rifle. Maya had positioned herself where she could cover this exit, and she had clear shots at him as he emerged from the burning building. Her first shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him around but not dropping him. The older man was tough and experienced. He managed to return fire even while wounded, forcing Maya to seek cover as rounds snapped past her position. Maya's second shot was better placed, hitting center mass and dropping the older man to his knees. He tried to bring his rifle up for another shot, but Maya's third round finished the engagement permanently. The checkpoint building was now fully engulfed in flames, with ammunition inside beginning to cook off from the heat. Maya ran toward her truck, hoping it hadn't been damaged by gunfire or debris from the fighting. Her vehicle appeared intact, though several bullet holes in the body panels showed how close some of the gunfire had come. Maya's priority now was recovering her essential equipment and getting away from the area before enemy reinforcements arrived. Her backpack had been scattered during the search, but Maya managed to recover most of her critical items, including the damaged satellite communicator and her intelligence materials. The maps and documents were intact, though some had been singed by the explosions. As Maya started her truck and prepared to leave, she could hear the sound of approaching vehicles in the distance. The older man's radio call for backup had been successful, and enemy reinforcements were close enough that she could see dust clouds on the horizon marking their approach. Maya threw the truck into gear and accelerated away from the burning checkpoint, taking a route that would avoid the main road where reinforcements would most likely be approaching. Her Air Force training included evasion and escape techniques that would help her avoid pursuit, but she needed to put distance between herself and the checkpoint before additional hostiles arrived. The truck bounced and jarred over rough terrain as Maya drove cross-country to avoid predictable routes. Behind her, the checkpoint continued burning, sending a column of black smoke into the clear desert sky. The smoke would be visible for miles and would draw attention from both friendly and hostile forces in the area. Maya drove hard for the first 20 minutes, putting maximum distance between herself and the burning checkpoint while the truck's engine could still handle the punishment. The rough terrain was taking its toll on the vehicle, but she needed to reach cover before enemy reinforcements could organize a proper search of the area. Her training had covered escape and evasion in hostile territory extensively. The key principles were simple: avoid predictable routes, minimize signatures that could be tracked, and reach friendly forces or secure communications as quickly as possible. The problem was that Maya was still deep in contested territory with limited options for either objective. The satellite communicator had been damaged during the firefight, though Maya couldn't tell how severely without proper testing equipment. The device's casing was cracked and one of the antenna elements had been bent, but the internal electronics might still be functional. Getting communications working again was critical. She needed to report the intelligence she had gathered and request extraction from her current position. Maya found a defensive position in a dry riverbed about 5 miles from the checkpoint. The location offered concealment from ground observation and some protection from small arms fire if she was discovered. More importantly, the elevated banks on either side would help mask her vehicle's thermal signature from any airborne search assets the enemy might deploy. Working quickly, Maya began field stripping the damaged communicator to assess its condition. 2 of the internal circuit boards showed impact damage, but the main processor and encryption modules appeared intact. The power supply was functional, though the battery indicator showed less than half charge remaining. Maya's technical training included basic electronics repair, and she had emergency repair supplies in her kit. Using conductive tape and bypass wires, she began working around the damaged circuits to restore basic functionality to the device. The work was delicate and time-consuming, but Maya forced herself to be methodical. A hasty repair job that failed at a critical moment could be worse than no communications at all. As she worked, she kept one ear tuned to sounds that might indicate pursuing vehicles, but so far the desert remained quiet except for wind and the distant sound of aircraft. After 40 minutes of careful work, Maya managed to get a weak signal from the communicator. The transmission power was reduced and the encryption protocols were operating in backup mode, but she could establish contact with her support base. The familiar sound of the connection handshake was enormously reassuring after the violence and isolation of the past few hours. "Control, this is Falcon 7 requesting immediate extraction," Maya transmitted, using her mission call sign and standard emergency procedures. The response came back scratchy but readable. "Falcon 7, Control copies your extraction request. What is your current status and position?" Maya quickly transmitted her GPS coordinates and a brief situation report. She kept the details minimal over the radio. Even encrypted military communications could potentially be intercepted and decoded by sophisticated adversaries. "Control, I encountered hostile forces at checkpoint Lima 7. 5 enemy Kia, facility destroyed. I have critical intelligence materials and require immediate extraction from current position." There was a pause before Control responded. "Falcon 7, we copy 5 enemy Kia and facility destruction. Extraction team is being vectored to your position. Estimated time to pick up is 90 minutes. Can you maintain your current position until extraction arrives?" Maya looked around her defensive position and considered the tactical situation. 90 minutes was a long time to remain static in hostile territory, especially with enemy forces likely organizing search operations in response to the checkpoint attack. But moving to a different location would require using the truck again, creating noise and dust signatures that could be detected. "Control, I can maintain position for 90 minutes if not compromised. Be advised that enemy forces called for reinforcements during the engagement and are likely conducting search operations in this area." "Understood, Falcon 7. Extraction team will approach from the northwest to avoid known enemy positions. Monitor this frequency for updates and be prepared to authenticate with standard challenge response codes." Maya acknowledged the transmission and began preparing her position for a potentially extended wait. The dry riverbed offered good concealment, but she needed to be ready to defend herself if discovered before the extraction team arrived. Her remaining ammunition was limited, 1 full magazine plus 3 loose rounds. Not much firepower if she encountered another large enemy force, but hopefully sufficient to hold out until help arrived. Maya also inventoried her other equipment: 2 remaining grenades, emergency medical supplies, water for another day, and the intelligence material she had gathered over the past week. The intelligence was potentially valuable enough to justify the risks she had taken to gather it. Detailed information about insurgent supply routes, weapons caches, and personnel movements could save American and coalition lives if properly utilized by operational commanders. Maya's mission had been successful despite the unexpected complications at the checkpoint. As she settled in to wait for extraction, Maya allowed herself to process the psychological impact of the engagement. She had killed 5 people in close combat, something that was never easy regardless of training and justification. The violence had been necessary for survival, but that didn't eliminate the human cost of such actions. Maya's Air Force training had included psychological preparation for combat situations, but actually taking lives in a desperate fight was different from theoretical instruction. She felt physically drained from the adrenaline surge of combat, and emotionally conflicted about the brutal efficiency with which she had eliminated the threats. But there would be time for processing those feelings later. Right now, Maya needed to stay alert and focused on getting out of hostile territory alive. The enemy forces would be looking for whoever had attacked their checkpoint, and her location was far from secure. 20 minutes into her wait, Maya heard the sound of helicopters in the distance. The aircraft were too far away to identify visually, but the sound was consistent with military rotorcraft rather than civilian aircraft. The question was whether they were friendly extraction assets or enemy search helicopters. Maya monitored her radio frequency carefully, waiting for any communication from the extraction team. If these were hostile aircraft, she would need to remain concealed until they passed. If they were friendly, she would need to be ready to signal her location and prepare for rapid pickup. The helicopters were getting closer, and Maya could now make out multiple aircraft, at least 2, possibly 3 separate machines. The sound signature suggested heavy transport helicopters rather than attack aircraft, which was consistent with either extraction or enemy reinforcement operations. Maya's radio crackled to life. "Falcon 7, this is Extraction 1 approaching your position from the northwest. Authenticate with your personal identification code." Maya felt relief flood through her as she recognized the standard military authentication procedure. "Extraction 1, this is Falcon 7. Authentication code Charlie 77 Alpha. Falcon 7, authentication confirmed. We have visual contact with your position. Pop smoke to mark your location for pickup." Maya pulled out her emergency smoke grenade and activated it, sending orange smoke billowing up from her position in the riverbed. Within seconds, she could see the first helicopter approaching, a massive CH-47 Chinook with door gunners visible in the side positions. The extraction was textbook perfect. The Chinook settled into the riverbed while maintaining rotor power, and Maya sprinted toward the rear loading ramp with her gear. Combat-equipped pararescue specialists provided security while she boarded, their weapons trained on potential threat directions. "Welcome aboard, Staff Sergeant," the team leader shouted over the rotor noise as Maya strapped into her seat. "Heard you had some excitement at that checkpoint." Maya nodded, too exhausted to manage more than basic responses. The helicopter lifted off immediately, with the pilot taking an evasive flight path to avoid potential ground fire from enemy forces in the area. As they gained altitude, Maya could see smoke still rising from the destroyed checkpoint miles away. Enemy vehicles were visible around the site, confirming that reinforcements had arrived after her escape. The timing of her extraction had been critical, much longer on the ground, and she might have been overwhelmed by superior numbers. The flight back to base took 40 minutes, giving Maya time to decompress slightly from the intensity of the past few hours. The pararescue team leader conducted a quick medical evaluation and confirmed that she had emerged from the engagement without serious injury, though she was showing signs of exhaustion and mild dehydration. "Intelligence is going to want to debrief you immediately," the team leader warned. "Word is your materials could be time-sensitive for ongoing operations." Maya understood. Military intelligence operated on compressed timelines, and information that could affect active missions took priority over everything else. Her rest and recovery would have to wait until after she had transferred her intelligence materials and provided detailed briefings on what she had observed. The helicopter touched down at the forward operating base as the sun was setting over the desert. Maya was met by intelligence officers who had been waiting for her return, along with medical personnel who would conduct more thorough health assessments. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, the senior intelligence officer, greeted her as she stepped off the helicopter. "Outstanding work out there. We understand you encountered significant resistance but managed to complete your mission objectives." Maya handed over her intelligence materials, maps, photographs, documents, and digital recordings that detailed insurgent activities across the region she had been monitoring. "Sir, the intelligence is complete through yesterday. I also have information about the checkpoint that was operating outside normal command authority. We'll need comprehensive debriefings on both the intelligence collection and the engagement at the checkpoint," the officer replied. "But first, get checked out by medical and get some food. You've earned it." As Maya walked toward the medical facility, she reflected on the mission and its outcome. She had successfully gathered critical intelligence that could save lives and disrupt enemy operations. She had survived a desperate combat engagement against overwhelming odds. Most importantly, she had proven to herself that her training and skills were sufficient to handle the worst situations military service could present. The checkpoint incident had lasted less than 2 hours from beginning to end, but it had tested every aspect of Maya's combat training and personal character. 5 criminals had made the fatal mistake of underestimating a quiet woman in civilian clothes, not knowing they were confronting an Air Force combat controller with the training and determination to fight her way out of any situation. The intelligence Maya had gathered would be processed and distributed to operational units within hours. Insurgent supply routes would be interdicted, weapons caches would be raided, and enemy personnel would be captured or eliminated based on the information she had risked her life to obtain. Maya's successful mission and dramatic escape would become part of the unofficial stories that military personnel shared about exceptional individual performance under extreme circumstances. The 5 thugs who had tried to rob and kidnap her had learned too late that appearances could be deceiving, and that training and determination could overcome even terrible odds. As she entered the medical facility for her post-mission evaluation, Maya was already thinking about her next assignment. Combat controllers were always in high demand for difficult missions in hostile territory, and her proven ability to handle unexpected situations would make her even more valuable for future operations. The checkpoint engagement had ended with Maya's complete victory, but, more importantly, it had demonstrated that American military training and individual courage could overcome any threat. The 5 criminals had made their last mistake when they decided to target someone they thought was helpless, never suspecting they were facing one of the Air Force's most elite specialists.